I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
If you've been looking to upgrade your supplement routine, now's the time to do it. Ritual's annual High Standards sale is live, meaning you can save on everything from their clinically studied women's multivitamins to their science-backed gut support. Get 40% off your first month at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really big one. We're diving deep into a legal landscape that honestly touches so many aspects of modern life, often in ways you might not even realize.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the intricate world of controlled substances and dangerous drugs.
Yeah, it's complex stuff.
And our guide for this exploration is, well, it's a remarkable source, a really comprehensive handout from the Denton Police Department's Basic Peace Officer course. It introduces the TCOE Health and Safety Code curriculum.
And it's packed with detail.
It really is. So our mission today is to try and cut through some of that dense legal jargon, give you a clear understanding of these critical definitions, classifications, and maybe most importantly, the profound implications of these laws.
Think of it as a shortcut.
Exactly. Your shortcut to truly understanding what's at stake.
And that shortcut is so valuable, I think. For you, our listener, getting these precise definitions right isn't just about legal trivia.
No, not at all.
It's really the absolute bedrock for comprehending the broader legal framework around these substances. It helps you see why certain things are treated so differently under the law.
Right, from how they're classified initially.
All the way to the penalties attached. We're going to hopefully illuminate some concepts you might think you already know and show just how incredibly detailed and, frankly, nuanced the legal world truly is here. It should help you teach yourself the core elements of this complex area.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Let's unpack this with a term that, honestly, on the surface seems incredibly simple. Drug.
Right.
When most of us hear drug, our minds probably jump to, pills in a medicine cabinet or maybe illicit substances.
Sure, the common associations.
But in the legal context, as defined by the Health and Safety Code, this word casts an incredibly wide net, much broader than you might expect. What are these surprising criteria?
It's surprisingly expansive, yeah. And it really sets the stage for everything that follows. The law defines a drug as a substance, and importantly, not a device, that meets one of 4 key conditions.
4.
Okay. First, it's recognized as a drug in official authoritative publications like the United States Pharmacopoeia or the National Formulary. These are sort of the gold standards for medicinal substances.
Got it. Official recognition. What's the second one?
Second, it's a substance intended for use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or animals.
Wow. Okay. That's huge. Diagnosis, cure, treatment, prevention for humans and animals.
Think about the sheer scope of that. From your everyday aspirin, maybe, to highly specialized veterinary medicines, it all falls under this.
And the definition keeps expanding. What's the third criterion?
The third criterion covers substances intended to affect the structure or function of the body of man or animals, but is not food.
Affects structure or function, but not food. So something designed to change how a body works, but not for nutrition.
Exactly. And finally, the fourth condition is for anything intended for use as a component of a substance described by paragraph A, B, or C.
Ah, so the ingredients too.
Pretty much. This means even the raw ingredients, the active compounds or, the foundational chemicals that go into making a drug are themselves legally defined as drugs.
So in essence, the law casts this incredibly broad legal net for what constitutes a drug. Why is that so crucial? I mean, it feels like it could encompass almost anything.
Well, that's precisely the point, isn't it? This broadness is kind of a proactive legal mechanism. Imagine trying to create specific laws for every single new synthetic compound or emerging substance that pops up.
It'd be impossible. You'd always be behind.
Exactly. Without this foundational, all-encompassing definition, many novel substances could operate unregulated for far too long. It establishes a wide base, making it easier to then categorize and control specific subsets of these drugs down the line without having to play catch-up constantly.
Okay, that makes sense. Establish the broad category first. So once we have that incredibly wide legal definition of drug, we then get to a much more specific term, controlled substance. This isn't just any drug, is it?
No, definitely not. It's a critical narrowing. A controlled substance is explicitly defined as a substance, and this is important, including not just a drug, but also any adulterant and any diluent.
Adulterant and diluent, so the stuff mixed in with it.
Exactly. And it must be specifically listed in either federal schedules I through V or in Texas's own distinct penalty groups 1, 1A, 1B, 2, 2A, 3, or 4.
Okay, so it has to be on one of those official lists.
Right. This immediately links the substance to a strict regulatory and penalty structure. But here's a point that often catches people off guard.
Yeah.
The definition explicitly includes the aggregate weight of any mixture, solution, or other substance containing a controlled substance.
The aggregate weight.
Okay.
That sounds really important. What's the practical implication of that in real cases, and how does it stop people from, trying to game the system?
Oh, it absolutely changes the game. Think of it this way. If someone is caught with a substance that's, say, 99% baking soda, just a harmless cutting agent, but 1% cocaine, the legal weight isn't just that tiny 1% of cocaine. It's the entire weight of the mixture, the whole 100%.
Wow. Okay. So the cutting agent counts towards the penalty weight.
Absolutely. This phrasing is vital because it prevents individuals from simply diluting controlled substances to try and drop into a lower penalty group. The law accounts for the total volume of illicit material being trafficked, not just the pure amount of the active drug. It's designed to capture the full scope of the illicit trade.
That makes perfect sense. It closes a potentially massive loophole. Okay, so what about substances that are explicitly designed to sort of skirt the law? I'm thinking about this concept of a controlled substance analog. This sounds like something cooked up in a lab specifically to avoid being on those lists.
You're exactly right. It's basically a legal response to illicit ingenuity, you could say. A controlled substance analog is defined as a substance with a chemical structure substantially similar to a controlled substance that's already listed in Schedule 1 or 2, or in those Texas penalty groups 1, 1A, 1B, 2, or 2A.
Substantially similar structure.
Okay. Or, even more broadly, it's also any substance specifically designed to produce an effect substantially similar to or greater than a controlled substance in those same categories.
So even if the structure isn't identical, if it acts like a listed drug.
Right. The intent here is to capture what we often call designer drugs. These are substances that are chemically tweaked just enough to avoid being on an explicitly listed schedule, but which still mimic the effects of illegal drugs. This ensures new variants can be legally controlled, often quite quickly, even before they've been individually added to the official lists.
So it's like a preemptive strike against new illicit compounds.
Yeah.
Smart. And then there's the concept of a counterfeit substance. How does that differ from an analog? They sound kind of similar.
They do, but they're distinct. While an analog mimics the effects or structure of a controlled substance, a counterfeit substance is actually a controlled substance that, without authorization, bears a simulated trademark, trade name, or other identifying mark of a manufacturer, distributor, or dispenser other than the true one.
Ah, okay. So it's pretending to be a legitimate or at least a known drug brand, but it's fake.
Exactly. It's essentially a fake version designed to deceive users about its origin or contents. Think of it like a knockoff or a pirated version, often sold under false pretenses, maybe pretending to be a legitimate painkiller but containing something else entirely, or just filler.
Okay, got it. Analog mimics effects, counterfeit mimics branding.
Right.
Let's trace these substances through their life cycle, starting with how they're made. We have terms like immediate precursor, manufacture, and production. Immediate precursor sounds like the absolute essential building blocks.
That's a really good way to put it. An immediate precursor is a substance that the designated authority, usually the head of the Department of Public Safety in Texas, identifies as a principal, compound, or chemical intermediary used primarily for the manufacture of a specific controlled substance.
So a key ingredient.
A vital key ingredient. And critically, the control of these precursors is deemed necessary to prevent, curtail, or limit the illicit manufacturing of controlled substances.
So they regulate the ingredients to stop the final product.
Precisely. It's a fundamental chemical building block, a component so essential to making an illegal drug that the law steps in to control it before it even becomes part of the final product. It's about cutting off the supply chain at its earliest possible point.
And manufacture itself. It seems like it would just mean, making something, but the legal definition seems quite broad here.
It is, yeah. The legal definition of manufacture covers a very wide range of processes involved in creating a controlled substance. We're talking production, preparation, compounding, conversion, processing, extraction, or chemical synthesis. All those steps.
Okay, the actual creation process.
Yes, but importantly, it explicitly includes the packaging or repackaging of the substance and the labeling or relabeling of its container.
So even just putting it into baggies and calling it something could count as manufacture.
If done illicitly, yes. That act of packaging and labeling falls under the legal definition of manufacture.
But there have to be exceptions, right? Because obviously, a pharmacist or a doctor isn't manufacturing illicit drugs when they're just doing their job.
Absolutely, and that's crucial. The term manufacture specifically does not include the preparation, compounding, packaging, or labeling of a controlled substance by a practitioner, that's your licensed professional, like a doctor or pharmacist, when that activity is incidental to them administering or dispensing a controlled substance in the course of their professional practice.
Makes sense. Standard medical practice isn't illicit manufacturing.
Right. Nor does it include activities by a practitioner or their authorized agent carried out for research, teaching, or chemical analysis, provided it's not for delivery. These are essential carve-outs that allow legitimate medical and scientific work to continue without being accidentally criminalized.
Okay. So manufacture is the specific act of making or packaging the substance, but production seems even broader based on the source.
Yes, production is kind of the umbrella term. It encompasses the entire life cycle of creating a controlled substance. The definition says it includes manufacturing, but it also covers planting, cultivating, growing, or harvesting.
So it brings in the agricultural side, too.
Exactly. This captures the entire agricultural aspect of illicit drug creation. Things like growing cannabis plants or opium poppies, right from the seed all the way through to initial processing.
Okay, so once a substance is made or produced, it starts to move. That brings us to terms like deliver, distribute, administer, and dispense. These sound really similar, but I'm guessing in the eyes of the law, they have very precise, distinct meanings.
They absolutely do, and getting these nuances is really key to understanding different drug offenses. Let's start with deliver.
Okay.
Deliver means to transfer, actually or constructively, a controlled substance, counterfeit substance, or drug paraphernalia.
Constructively, what does that mean?
It means you don't necessarily have to physically hand it over. You could, say, tell someone where it's hidden and give them access. That's a constructive transfer.
Got it.
And crucially, it applies regardless of whether there is an agency relationship, meaning it doesn't matter if you're just a middleman acting for someone else. And maybe most importantly, it includes offering to sell.
Wow, just the offer counts.
Yes. The mere verbal offer to sell is legally considered a delivery in this context. The source also clarifies that delivery, or a drug transaction, is simply the act of delivering.
Okay, so deliver is the general act of transfer, even just an offer. How then does distribute differentiate itself? It sounds almost the same.
It's a narrower, more specific form of delivery. Distribute means delivering a controlled substance other than by administering or dispensing the substance.
Other than administering or dispensing. Okay, so not the medical side.
Right. Think of it this way. If a drug dealer is selling a large quantity to another dealer, maybe moving bulk product, that's distribution. If a doctor gives a patient a prescription for medication at a pharmacy, that's dispensing, not distributing. The distinction lies in the context and the authorization, or lack thereof. Distribution typically implies illicit, often larger-scale movement outside of legitimate medical or pharmaceutical channels.
Okay, that clarifies it. And administer and dispense are where those legitimate medical actions come into play.
Precisely. To administer means to directly apply a controlled substance to the body of a patient or a research subject.
Direct application.
Yeah, by injection, inhalation, ingestion, or any other direct means. And it must be done by a practitioner or their authorized agent in their presence, or by the patient or research subject themselves at the direct order and in the presence of a practitioner.
So very supervised, direct medical application.
Exactly. It's about direct, supervised application for a specific medical or research purpose.
And dispense, how does that differ from administer?
Dispense is the delivery of a controlled substance, but specifically in the course of professional practice or research. This is done by a practitioner or someone acting under their lawful order to an ultimate user, that's the patient or a research subject.
So it's still delivery, but in a professional context.
Right. And it's a broader category than administer, because dispense includes prescribing, administering, packaging, labeling, or compounding necessary to prepare the substance for that delivery.
Ah, okay. So dispense covers the whole process of getting the drug ready and giving it to the patient, which might include administering it, but also includes things like writing the prescription or putting pills in a bottle.
You've got it. While administering is that very direct, hands-on active application, dispensing is the overall process of providing the substance to the end user, often involving preparation and instructions, and always within a legitimate professional context.
The key distinction there, then, is that administer is direct application, often by the pro, while dispense is the whole process of providing the substance to the ultimate user, usually involving some preparation or a prescription. Very subtle, but legally critical.
Absolutely. The law has to be meticulously precise about these definitions because they really determine what constitutes a lawful act versus a criminal one.
All right, let's quickly round out our foundational.
Lowe's knows to bring your vision to life, it's important to find the right color. That's why MyLowe's Rewards members get a free Valspar paint or exterior stain sample to test your look to confidently refresh your space. Offer valid in-store only 8/7 to 8/20. Limit 1 per customer while supplies last. Discount taken at time of purchase. See associate for details. Rewards program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Terms here. We have human consumption and drug paraphernalia. Human consumption seems pretty self-explanatory, but what's the legal angle or significance?
Legally, human consumption specifically means the injection, inhalation, ingestion, or application of a substance to or into a human body. It's defining the methods by which a substance gets into a person's system. It's important because certain laws or penalties are tied specifically to substances intended for human consumption.
Okay, and drug paraphernalia. My first thought is, a pipe or a bong. But based on how broad everything else is, I'm guessing it covers way more than just the obvious stuff.
Oh, it is incredibly broad, and this is where it gets really interesting for potentially everyday items. Drug paraphernalia means any equipment, product, or material that is used or, critically, intended for use in a huge array of activities related to controlled substances.
Intended for use. That seems key.
It is. The list includes planting, propagating, cultivating, growing, harvesting, manufacturing, compounding, converting, producing, processing, preparing, testing, analyzing, packaging, repackaging, storing, containing, or concealing a controlled substance in violation of the law.
Wow, that's everything leading up to use.
And it also covers items used or intended for use in injecting, ingesting, inhaling, or otherwise introducing a controlled substance into the human body in violation of the law. The source then goes on to list pages of examples showing just how comprehensive it is. So yes, a common plastic baggie, a digital scale, maybe even a spoon bent in a certain way could potentially be deemed paraphernalia if the intended use, based on context and other evidence, is tied to illicit drug activity.
So intent and context are absolutely key for paraphernalia.
Okay.
Finally, 2 fundamental legal concepts that seem to underpin nearly every offense: person and possession.
Right, foundational terms. Person is defined very widely. It includes an individual, naturally, but also a corporation, government or governmental subdivision or agency, business trust, estate trust, partnership association, or any other legal entity.
So it's not just individuals who can commit these offenses.
Correct. This ensures that the law can apply to a broad range of actors. And possession, this is crucial, means actual care, custody, control, or management.
Care, custody, control, or management. So it's not just about having something physically on you, like in your pocket.
Exactly. It's about having authority or dominion over it. For example, if you have the keys to a car or a locker where drugs are stored, even if they aren't physically on your person at that moment, that could constitute possession if you have the ability and intent to exercise control over those drugs. These concepts, person and possession, are critical building blocks for almost every offense in the Health and Safety Code.
Okay, now that we've got those fundamental definitions laid out, Let's dive into one of the most talked about and rapidly evolving areas, marijuana and its legal cousin, hemp. First, marijuana. The legal definition is quite specific, isn't it? Not just any cannabis plant.
It certainly is, and getting this definition right is the starting point for distinguishing it legally from hemp. So, legally, marijuana refers to the plant cannabis sativa L, whether growing or not, its seeds, and every compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of the plant or its seeds.
Okay, so in broad strokes, it's the cannabis plant itself and most things derived directly from it. Seems straightforward enough.
Mostly. But here's where it gets really interesting. As you said earlier, the definition of marijuana has some critical exclusions, things that are specifically not considered marijuana under the law.
Ah, the exceptions. This is precisely where the modern legal lines are drawn, especially with the emergence of legal hemp, right?
That's exactly where the crucial nuances lie. The definition of marijuana does not include several things. First, the resin extracted from any part of the plant or any preparation of that resin.
So hashish or concentrates aren't technically marijuana by this definition. They might fall under other categories like PG2's THC definition.
Potentially, yes, depending on the THC concentration and form. It highlights the complexity. Also excluded are the mature stalks of the plant or fiber produced from those stalks. Think of this as the industrial parts, hemp fiber for rope or textiles.
Right, the non-psychoactive parts.
Also excluded oil or cake made from the seeds of the plant, and any compound, manufacture, salt, derivative, mixture, or preparation of those mature stalks, fiber, oil, or cake. And importantly, sterilized seeds of the plant that are incapable of germination, so seeds that can't grow into new plants.
Okay, so industrial parts, seed products, non-viable seeds.
And most significantly, the definition of marijuana does not include hemp as defined by the Agriculture Code.
Which brings us to the big one.
Exactly. These exclusions are vital because they allow for the legal processing and use of certain parts of the cannabis plant that either have negligible psychoactive properties or are used for industrial purposes, or, in the case of hemp, for specific commercial and agricultural cultivation under strict rules.
And that leads us directly to hemp, a term that has completely reshaped the legal landscape for cannabis plants in recent years. The defining factor, as our source highlights, comes down to a very specific chemical threshold.
Yes, the definition of hemp is incredibly precise, and it's all about that threshold. It's defined as the plant cannabis sativa L and any part of that plant, including the seeds of the plant, and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salt, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis.
Not more than 0.3% delta 9 THC. That's specific.
That's specific. What's fascinating here is that this minuscule exact chemical threshold of 0.3% delta 9 THC is the absolute determining factor for legality in many contexts. It's an incredibly fine line drawn by chemistry that separates what is considered a legal agricultural product from what is still considered an illegal controlled substance, marijuana.
So, to really simplify it for everyone listening, it boils down to that 0.3% delta 9 THC number. If a cannabis plant or product tests over that tiny percentage, it's legally considered marijuana, and it's illegal under these controlled substance laws.
Correct.
But if it tests at or below that 0.3% threshold, it's legally defined as hemp, and it's general legal, subject to other regulations, of course. That 0.3% is the magic number that shapes so much of the legal reality today.
It truly is. And this precise legal distinction really highlights the legislative intent, which was to differentiate between industrial or commercial hemp, which has very low psychoactive potential, and what is traditionally considered illegal marijuana. It's essentially a chemical line in the sand, and it directly impacts farmers, businesses processing CBD or other hemp products, and of course law enforcement trying to distinguish between the two.
And the source also makes it clear that the state, Texas in this case, wants to control its own hemp production. It wasn't just a federal change. The state stepped in to regulate it actively.
Absolutely. The legislative intent, as stated right in the source material, is for the state to have primary regulatory authority over hemp production. To make that happen, the Texas Department of Agriculture, working in consultation with the governor and the attorney general, is mandated to develop a state plan for monitoring and regulating hemp production within Texas.
A whole state plan.
Yes, and this plan has to comply with both federal requirements, like those from the USDA, and state codes. And it has to be submitted to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for approval.
And what if the feds don't approve the state's plan initially? It sounds like there's a potential back and forth process built in.
There is. If the plan is disapproved by the USDA secretary, the Texas Department of Agriculture, again after consulting with the governor and attorney general, has to amend the plan and resubmit it until it gets that federal approval. The department also has the authority to adopt any necessary rules to implement and administer this state hemp plan.
So it's a careful, multi-level regulatory dance.
It really is. This process shows the careful approach states like Texas took to integrating a substance that was once broadly illegal, cannabis, into a regulated agricultural framework, but only for the low THC version, hemp. It reflects a significant shift in policy, moving from just outright prohibition of all cannabis sativa L to a complex system of careful monitoring and control specifically for hemp.
Okay, now that we've covered those foundational definitions, and crucially, that really important distinction between hemp and marijuana based on THC levels, let's zoom out again. Let's look at the broader landscape of illicit substances. Our source material organizes these into general categories based on their effects, which I find super helpful for just understanding them.
Yeah, it's a useful framework.
These include narcotics, depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens, marijuana itself, and simulated controlled substances.
And understanding these categories is really essential, not just for law enforcement trying to identify substances, but also for public safety, because it helps classify substances, anticipate their effects on people, and recognize the signs of use or intoxication. It allows for a more structured approach to drug identification, intervention, and even informing treatment strategies.
Let's start with the first category mentioned. Narcotic analgesics, which the source also notes are a type of depressant. What's their primary function and how are they typically administered?
Right, so narcotic analgesics function primarily to, well, relieve pain. That's the analgesic part. But they also induce euphoria and mood changes, which is often the driver for abuse.
Pain relief and euphoria, a powerful combination.
Extremely powerful. And they can be administered in several ways. Ingestion, like swallowing pills, smoking, or insufflation, which is just snorting the substance.
And what kind of substances fall into this category?
This category includes naturally derived opiates like opium itself and codeine, semisynthetics like heroin, and fully synthetic opioids. This includes things like Demerol, Dilaudid, morphine, methadone, Vicodin, OxyContin, and hydrocodone.
Wow, so many of those are or were widely prescribed medications.
Exactly, and that's a key point. This group really highlights how substances can bridge that gap between legitimate legal prescription use and dangerous illicit abuse.
Absolutely. What about specific appearances or, street names for some of the more notorious ones, like heroin? The source gets quite specific here.
It does. Heroin can appear as a brown powder or sometimes as a tar substance, which is often black and sticky. Common street names mentioned include chiva, boy, white, often called China white, which is typically higher purity, and tar, or black tar.
It mentions something called cheese heroin. That sounds unusual.
It sounds unusual, and it's particularly alarming. Cheese heroin is described as a combination of black tar heroin mixed with crushed Tylenol PM tablets.
Tylenol PM. Why?
The acetaminophen and diphenhydramine in Tylenol PM likely add to the sedative effects, but it also makes it look less like typical heroin, perhaps more like grated cheese, hence the name. The source describes it as highly addictive and very dangerous, typically appearing as a tan-colored powder that's usually snorted through a nose with a tube or straw.
And it's popular among juveniles.
Disturbingly, yes. The source notes it's often packaged in small folded paper or Ziploc bags, is very cheap, and unfortunately gained popularity among juveniles, possibly due to its low cost and the perceived safer method of use, snorting versus injecting.
That cheese heroin detail is really disturbing, especially that connection to young people. Okay, so what are the general symptoms someone might show if they're using narcotics? And maybe more critically, what are the signs of an overdose?
Right. Symptoms of narcotic use, think opioid effects include things like depressed reflexes, noticeable drowsiness or nodding off, droopy eyelids, dry mouth, a state of euphoria, sometimes facial itching. Nausea is common, and if injecting, you might see visible puncture marks. Speech might become slow or raspy, and breathing slows down significantly.
Slowed breathing sounds like a key danger sign.
It is, and for overdose, the crucial life-threatening signs to look for are extremely slow and shallow breathing, skin becoming clammy and cold, possible seizures, and ultimately coma. If you see these overdose signs, it's an absolute medical emergency. Immediate intervention, often with naloxone if available, is critical.
Okay. Moving on to the next category, CNS depressants. These are things like sedatives or tranquilizers. What's their main effect?
As the name suggests, CNS depressants slow down the brain and body. They depress the central nervous system. They are typically administered orally, like pills or liquids, or sometimes by injection.
And examples here.
Examples listed include alcohol, which is the most common CNS depressant, but also drugs like GHB, Rohypnol, often known as a date rape drug, and various benzodiazepines, think Valium and Xanax. Some antipsychotics like Haldol and antidepressants like Lexapro are also mentioned, likely in the context of misuse or overdose potential, as they also have CNS depressant effects.
The source mentions Valium and Xanax specifically, appearing as tablets or capsules taken orally. What are their effects on users?
Right. Their intended effect is to reduce anxiety, but they also cause drowsiness, lethargy, and they disrupt psychomotor skills, intellectual function, and perceptual abilities. Essentially, they impair coordination, clear thinking, and reaction time.
Okay. What are the common symptoms of someone using CNS depressants and, again, the critical overdose signs?
Symptoms often mimic alcohol intoxication. You might see horizontal gaze nystagmus, OHGN. That's an involuntary jerking of the eye when looking side to side, a key indicator often used in roadside sobriety tests. Also, poor coordination, disorientation, sluggishness, thick or slurred speech, generally drunk behavior without the smell of alcohol necessarily, stumbling and fumbling.
And overdose.
Overdose signs for CNS depressants are also severe. Very shallow breathing, cold and clammy skin, often dilated pupils, unlike the constricted pupils typical of opioid overdose, a rapid but weak pulse, and potentially coma. Again, an immediate medical emergency.
Got it. Next up, the opposite effect, CNS stimulants. As the name implies, these speed things up, right? Accelerating bodily functions.
Precisely. CNS stimulants increase heart rate and blood pressure. They also increase alertness, cause excitement, reduce appetite, and can promote euphoria. They basically kick the central nervous system into high gear.
And how are these typically taken?
They can be administered in various ways. Insufflation, snorting, smoking, injection, or oral ingestion, swallowing pills.
Oh, whoa.
This category includes commonly prescribed drugs that are often diverted or abused, like Adderall, amphetamines, ephedrine, found in some cold meds, phentermine,
Lowe's knows that more projects mean more tools. For a limited time, new and existing MyLowe's Rewards credit card members can get 12-month special financing on purchases of $299 or more, in-store and online. Don't wait to get the things you need. Get special financing today. Lowe's. We help. You save. Now through August 27th, choose 12-month special financing on purchases of $299 or more. Offer subject to credit approval and cannot be combined. Minimum monthly payments required. See store or Lowe's.com for details.
weight loss drug, and even Sudafed, pseudoephedrine, a precursor. And of course, it includes major illicit substances like cocaine and methamphetamine.
Cocaine, and especially its form crack cocaine, are probably the most well-known stimulants. What should we know about their appearance and effects, particularly the difference between powder cocaine and crack?
Cocaine usually appears as a fine white powder. Crack cocaine is a free base form of cocaine that's processed, often with baking soda, into small, hard chunks or rocks. Street names mentioned are rock, hard, and crack. It's usually sold by the rock or a specific dollar amount, maybe $10 or $20, and can be found packaged in small baggies, vials, sometimes carried loose, or even concealed in the mouth for quick disposal.
And the effects differ.
While the core effects are similar to powdered cocaine, intense euphoria, energy, crack is typically smoked, which leads to much faster absorption to the bloodstream and brain. So the source notes that crack's effects are more rapid and are more intense, but they're also shorter lasting. This rapid, intense, but short high often leads to more frequent use and intense binges, making it highly addictive.
Okay. And then there's methamphetamine, which has a really specific and frankly concerning profile described in the source, especially with chronic long-term use.
Yeah. Methamphetamine, or meth, is a powerful synthetic stimulant. It was first synthesized way back in 1919 in Japan. While there is a legal prescription form used for things like ADD or narcolepsy, Desoxyn, illicit meth is far more common. It typically appears as an odorless, white or off-white, bitter-tasting powder, but it also comes in pills, capsules, and larger crystals, often referred to as ice or crystal meth.
And it's easy to make.
Notoriously so. The source notes it's relatively easy and cheap to manufacture, often in dangerous, makeshift, clandestine labs using readily available chemicals, which poses huge safety risks. When it's smoked, snorted, or injected, its effects are described as almost instantaneous, while swallowing it takes maybe half an hour to kick in.
And the long-term effects sound devastating. Amphetamine psychosis.
Yes, chronic meth use can lead to severe psychological problems, including what's termed amphetamine psychosis. This is characterized by extreme paranoia, intense self-absorption, auditory and visual hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't there, severe irritability, and often aggressive or erratic behavior. These effects are often intensified by the severe lack of sleep that frequently accompanies heavy meth use.
And it mentions meth sores.
Right. Another distressing physical manifestation of chronic use is meth sores. These are often open wounds, typically on the face and arms, caused by users compulsively picking or scratching at their skin due to a common hallucination called formication, the sensation of insects crawling on or under the skin. It's a very visible and damaging side effect.
That sounds awful. Okay, what are the general symptoms someone might show using stimulants and the overdose signs?
Symptoms of stimulant use can include noticeable anxiety or agitation, body tremors, dry mouth, euphoria, exaggerated reflexes, appearing very excited or hyperactive, eyelid tremors, grinding teeth, bruxism, increased alertness or inability to sit still, severe insomnia, irritability, sometimes nasal redness or damage from snorting, restlessness, a runny nose if snorting, and being excessively talkative or rambling.
An overdose.
Stimulant overdose is very dangerous. Signs include severe agitation, significantly increased body temperature, hyperthermia, hallucinations, and seizures. These can quickly lead to cardiac arrest or stroke, becoming life-threatening.
Okay, moving on to hallucinogens. These substances, as the name suggests, really distort a person's perception of reality.
Indeed. Hallucinogens primarily distort senses and perceptions, often leading to profound alterations in thought, mood, and sensory experiences. They can be taken in many ways. Ingestion, eaten or drunk, smoked, taken as eye drops, injected, or insufflated, snorted.
And the examples cover a wide range, natural and synthetic.
Yes, examples include naturally occurring substances like ayahuasca, a brew from South America, DMT, found in some plants, peyote, a cactus containing mescaline, and psilocybin, the active compound in magic mushrooms. Then there are synthetic ones like LSD and MDMA, which is commonly known as Molly or ecstasy.
Let's focus for a second on LSD and ecstasy, as they're quite well known. How do they typically appear?
LSD, or lysergic acid diethylamide, most commonly appears as liquid on paper, where drops are put onto absorbent water paper, often printed with designs, which is then cut into small squares or tabs. It can also be found as a liquid in vials, or sometimes as a powder or in capsules or microdots. Ecstasy, which is MDMA, also sometimes called Skittles or rolls due to its appearance, usually comes in colorful tablets, often stamped with logos or designs.
And the effects of ecstasy. The source mentions hallucinogenic effects, but also toxicity.
Right. Ecstasy MDMA is described as having mild hallucinogenic effects, but also stimulant properties. It often causes increased tactile sensitivity and feelings of empathy or closeness. However, it also comes with risks: impaired memory and learning, cardiac toxicity, renal and liver toxicity. There's a definite potential for serious health problems, especially with high doses or frequent use.
What about general symptoms for traditional hallucinogens like LSD or mushrooms? And are there overdose signs?
Symptoms of hallucinogen use can include body tremors, a dazed or confused appearance, difficulty speaking clearly, disorientation, especially regarding time and place, obvious hallucinations, visual or auditory, memory loss, nausea, paranoia, excessive perspiring, poor perception of time and distance, and sometimes synesthesia.
Synesthesia, what's that?
That's a fascinating neurological phenomenon where senses get sort of cross-wired. Someone might report seeing sounds or hearing colors. Users might also appear uncoordinated. Now, regarding overdose, the source explicitly states no OD for general hallucinogens like LSD or psilocybin, meaning a direct fatal overdose from the substance itself is extremely rare. However, it notes that MDMA ecstasy overdose symptoms are similar to those of stimulants because MDMA has significant stimulant properties. So agitation, high body temperature, seizures are possible. The primary danger with most traditional hallucinogens isn't direct toxicity overdose, but rather the altered perception leading to accidents or dangerous behaviors.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there's a specific subcategory, dissociative anesthetics. These are also hallucinogenic, but they have a unique impact on how the body perceives pain.
Exactly. These substances function primarily by inhibiting pain by cutting off the brain's perception of pain signals. They create a sense of detachment or dissociation from reality and one's own body.
How are these taken, and what are some examples?
Administration methods include smoking, often sprayed onto plant material like tobacco or marijuana, ingestion, injection, or even taken as eye drops. Examples include PCP, phencyclidine, its various chemical analogs, ketamine, which has legitimate medical uses but is also abused, and flecainide. an antiarrhythmic drug also listed here, perhaps due to potential dissociative side effects in misuse.
And the symptoms of using dissociatives like PCP or ketamine.
Symptoms can be quite distinct and alarming. Users might exhibit a blank stare, profound confusion, disorientation, often a distinctive chemical odor on their breath or clothes, sometimes cyclic behavior, swinging rapidly between agitation and calm, difficult, slowed, or slurred speech, early onset HGN, hallucinations, and a significantly increased tolerance to pain, which can be very dangerous. They might also be perspiring heavily, possibly violent or unpredictable, and experiencing severe sensory distortions.
Increased pain tolerance sounds incredibly risky. What about overdose?
The source notes that a direct overdose is unlikely unless combined with other drugs like alcohol or depressants. However, it strongly warns that the delusions can create dangerous suicidal behavior and high body temp that can be deadly. A state called excited delirium can be evident, which involves extreme agitation, aggression, disorientation, and dangerously high body temperature, hyperthermia, and can absolutely be fatal, often requiring immediate medical intervention and sedation.
Okay, let's circle back to cannabis marijuana, our fifth category, which we also touched on earlier when distinguishing it from hemp. What are its main effects, according to the source?
Cannabis generally alters the mind, can increase heart rate, and also relaxes and enlarges breathing passages, bronchodilation. It's typically ingested in edibles or smoked. The main psychoactive ingredient responsible for the high is THC, specifically delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol.
And smoking is the common method.
Yes, the source points out that marijuana is usually smoked in forms like joints, hand-rolled cigarettes, pipes, bongs, water pipes, or blunts, cigars hollowed out and refilled with marijuana.
The source also includes a pretty startling statistic about modern potency.
It does. It states, the potency of marijuana THC levels today is 15-20 times stronger than marijuana in the 1970s. That's a massive increase.
15 to 20 times stronger. That's huge. It means the effects and potential risks are likely much different now than decades ago.
Absolutely. This significantly increases its psychoactive effects, the intensity of the high, and also the potential for adverse reactions like anxiety, paranoia, or even temporary psychosis in susceptible individuals, especially with high THC products like concentrates.
What are the common symptoms of cannabis use listed?
Symptoms include body tremors and often eyelid tremors, some disorientation, sometimes visible debris in the mouth if smoked, impaired perception of time may seem to slow down, distorted distance perception, reduced inhibitions, increased appetite, commonly called the munchies, marked reddening of the conjunctiva, the whites of the eyes become bloodshot, a characteristic burnt marijuana odor on the person or in the area, and sometimes paranoia, especially with higher doses or inexperienced users.
And overdose potential for cannabis.
Similar to traditional hallucinogens, the source explicitly states no OD for cannabis, meaning a fatal overdose solely from THC is considered exceptionally rare to virtually impossible. However, high doses can cause very unpleasant effects like panic attacks or vomiting.
Okay, now what about those synthetic cannabinoids we mentioned earlier, like K2 and spice? They're often marketed deceptively, aren't they?
Yes, very deceptively. K2, spice, and similar products are described as man-made, mind-altering chemicals. They are not marijuana. They're chemicals sprayed onto dried, shredded plant material so they can be smoked, or sold as liquids to be vaporized and inhaled in e-cigarettes or similar devices.
And they're labeled weirdly?
Often, yes. They're frequently labeled not for human consumption as a way to try and bypass drug regulations. They might be sold online or in head shops as herbal incense or potpourri.
But they're dangerous.
Extremely. The source stresses their unpredictable, severe, or even life-threatening psychoactive effects. Because they are unregulated and the specific chemicals used can vary wildly and change constantly to evade detection, their effects are completely unpredictable. Users can experience extreme anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations, violent behavior, seizures, kidney damage, and there have been deaths linked to their use. They are significantly more dangerous than natural cannabis.
Good to know. Definitely not just fake weed. Okay, next category. Inhalants. These seem different, often common household products used in a very dangerous way.
That's right. Inhalants aren't typically manufactured as drugs. They are volatile substances found in everyday products that produce mind-altering results when their fumes are inhaled or sniffed, a practice often called huffing.
What kind of products are we talking about?
Common examples include volatile solvents like those found in glues, paints, paint thinners, gasoline, cleaning fluids, aerosols like spray paint, hairspray, deodorant spray, vegetable oil sprays, and gases like those used in lighters, butane, whipped cream dispensers, nitrous oxide or whippets, or anesthetic gases.
Just inhaling fumes from these common items.
Yes, directly inhaling the concentrated vapors. The symptoms of inhalant use can include bloodshot or watery eyes, confusion or disorientation, a flushed face, headaches, loss of muscle control or coordination, appearing non-communicative or unable to respond coherently, often the telltale odor or residue of the substance on the person's breath, skin, or clothing, nausea, and slow, thick, or slurred speech. They might appear drunk or dizzy.
And overdose signs.
Overdose signs include seizures and coma, but inhalant abuse is uniquely dangerous because even a single session can be fatal due to something called sudden sniffing death syndrome, which is essentially cardiac arrest caused by the volatile chemicals disrupting heart rhythm. Suffocation is also a risk if substances are inhaled from a bag placed over the head. It's extremely risky behavior.
Absolutely terrifying. Okay, in our last category from that initial overview, simulated controlled substances. We touched on this briefly with counterfeits, but let's revisit.
Right. These are essentially substances that are purported to be a controlled substance, look-alike, but are chemically different from the controlled substance. This category really deals with deception. The substance is presented as being an illicit drug, maybe looking like a certain pill or powder, but it isn't actually that drug. It might be inert, or it could contain something else entirely different and unexpected. It's often about defrauding buyers who think they are purchasing an illegal controlled substance.
Okay, wow. We've covered a huge amount on the definitions and characteristics of all these different substances. Now let's pivot to the consequences. This is where things get really serious. Offenses related to controlled substances are categorized into what our source calls penalty groups. And these groups, numbered 1 through 4 in Texas, essentially determine how severe the offense is and what the potential penalties are.
Yeah, this is absolutely where the rubber meets the road, legally speaking, and where our understanding of all those definitions and classifications really translates into seeing the real-world impact of the legal system. These penalty groups classify substances based on things like their perceived danger, potential for abuse, and whether they have accepted medical uses.
And knowing which group a substance falls into is critical.
Absolutely critical, because it directly impacts sentencing. It dictates everything from whether something is a misdemeanor or felony, the potential range of jail or prison time, and the possible fines, which can be massive. It's often a very aggressive escalation system designed to deter large-scale manufacturing, trafficking, and even possession, particularly of substances deemed most dangerous.
Let's go through the key substances listed in each penalty group, as detailed in our source. Starting with the most serious, Penalty Group 1. PG1. What's in there?
Right. Penalty Group 1 includes some of the substances often.
Lowe's knows to bring your vision to life, it's important to find the right color. That's why Lowe's Rewards members get a free Valspar paint or exterior stain sample to test your look to confidently refresh your space. Offer valid in-store only 8/7 to 8/20. Limit 1 per customer while supplies last. Discount taken at time of purchase. See associate for details. Rewards program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Perceived as the most dangerous or having the highest potential for abuse, often referred to as hard drugs. This includes opiates and opioids like heroin, morphine, methadone, oxycodone like OxyContin, and hydromorphone like Deloaded. It also includes stimulants like cocaine and methamphetamine. Additionally, it lists GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate, ketamine, and even LSD, and 2-fumino-5-dimethoxyphenethylamine, 2CH, a psychedelic phenethylamine.
Okay, a mix of opioids, stimulants, and some hallucinogens dissociatives. Now, Penalty Group 1A, PG1A, is interesting because it explicitly lists LSD again, even though it's just mentioned in PG1. Why the specific separate category just for LSD?
That's a really key point and highlights how specific the law gets. While LSD appears in PG1, likely as part of a broader category, PG1A specifically singles out lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, including its salts, isomers, and salts of isomer.
So why the special treatment?
The reason for this distinct categorization is that LSD penalties are often based on dosage units rather than aggregate weight. LSD is typically distributed on blotter paper in tiny amounts per hit or unit. So PG1A allows the law to assign penalties based on the number of units, for example, hits on blotter paper, which is often more practical and reflective of the scale of distribution for LSD than trying to measure minuscule weights. It has its own specific penalty structure based on units.
That makes sense. Tailoring the penalty structure to the form of the drug. Okay, then we have Penalty Group 1B, PG1B. This group, as our source highlights, includes some particularly potent substances, and the consequences attached sound extremely severe.
They are. Penalty Group 1B is critically important today, especially with the ongoing opioid crisis. It includes specific, highly potent synthetic opioids, most notably fentanyl, alpha-methylfentanyl, and any other derivative of fentanyl.
Fentanyl, we hear so much about it.
Yes. Our source describes fentanyl accurately as a powerful synthetic opioid used as a pain medication and, together with other medications, for anesthesia. It has legitimate medical uses. However, it's also tragically and increasingly used as a recreational drug, often illicitly manufactured and sometimes mixed with heroin, cocaine, benzodiazepines, or methamphetamine, often without the user even knowing it's there.
And the source mentions a very specific, severe consequence linked to this group.
It does, and it's stark. There is a specific note indicating a potential murder offense on the dealer when someone dies from using these substances in relation to PG1B. While the exact legal mechanism might involve specific homicide statutes enhanced by the drug delivery, this notation clearly underscores a legal pathway to hold dealers accountable for overdose deaths caused by fentanyl and its analogs. It reflects the extreme lethality of these substances and gives prosecutors a powerful tool.
Wow, that's a significant legal shift, treating dealing in these substances potentially as murder if someone dies. Okay, let's move to Penalty Group 2, PG2. What substances fall into this group?
Penalty Group 2 covers a broader range of substances, including many hallucinogens and some stimulants, as well as THC concentrates. Examples listed are ecstasy, MDMA, psilocybin from mushrooms, rohypnol, the prescription stimulant Adderall, PCP, phencyclidine, also known as angel dust, mescaline from the peyote cactus, and synthetic cathinones, often known as bath salts, like MDPV.
And THC is in this group too, not just marijuana.
Right. Significantly, PG2 includes various forms of concentrated THC. Specifically listed are THC tetrahydrocannabinol itself when separated from the plant, THC wax, shatter, both are concentrates, THC edibles, and THC vape pens. This is crucial because possessing these concentrated forms carries much harsher penalties than possessing the equivalent amount of leafy marijuana.
And there's a special note for edibles within that group. How does that work?
Yes, the source clarifies an important, somewhat tricky distinction for edibles. For edibles, if you can clearly see the marijuana plant material within the edible, it is considered a marijuana charge, which has its own generally less severe penalty structure. However, if you cannot see marijuana plant material, meaning a liquid extract or concentrate was used to make the edible, then the entire weight of the edible falls under Penalty Group 2.
So a brownie with visible pot leaves might be treated differently than a gummy bear made with THC oil, even if the THC dose is the same.
Legally, yes, according to this distinction. The presence or absence of visible plant material determines whether it's charged under the marijuana statutes or the more severe PG2 statutes based on the total weight of the edible product. It's a fine point that can have huge penalty implications.
Okay, speaking of related groups, Penalty Group 2A, PG2A, what substances fall into that specific category?
Penalty Group 2A primarily consists of those synthetic cannabinoids we discussed earlier, things like K2, spicy, often generically called synthetic marijuana. As we noted, these are the man-made chemicals often sprayed on plant matter and deceptively marketed as incense, or labeled not for human consumption, to try and skirt regulations, despite their potent and dangerous effects.
Got it. Synthetics get their own group. Next, Penalty Group 3, PG3.
Penalty Group 3 includes a number of prescription medications that have a potential for abuse, but generally less than PG1 or PG2 substances. It also includes some hormones and steroids. Examples listed are benzodiazepines like Xanax, alprazolam, lorazepam, Atvon, clonazepam, Klonopin, and diazepam, Valium. Also included are certain opioid-containing medications like hydrocodone, found in Vicodin, Lortab, and codeine cough syrups at higher concentrations than PG4. Other substances include the stimulant Ritalin, methylphenidate, human growth hormone, HGH, testosterone, and other anabolic steroids.
So lots of commonly prescribed meds, but with abuse potential.
Exactly. This group highlights how even legitimate medicines are controlled due to their potential for misuse and diversion.
And finally, Penalty Group 4, PG4. What's left for this group?
Penalty Group 4 generally covers compounds, mixtures, or preparations containing limited quantities of certain narcotics mixed with one or more non-narcotic active medicinal ingredients in specific, usually small proportions. The idea is these mixtures have a lower potential for abuse than the narcotic ingredient on its own.
Like cough syrup with a little bit of codeine.
Exactly. The source gives an example. a mixture containing not more than 200 milligrams of codeine per 100 milliliters or 100 grams. It also includes certain other drugs like buprenorphine, used in opioid addiction treatment like Suboxone, though sometimes diverted, and butorphanol, another opioid analgesic, and pyrovalerone, stimulant. Common examples mentioned are certain barbiturates, though many are in higher schedules, and narcotic cough syrup containing dextromethorphan, DXM, when abused in high quantities, though DXM itself isn't typically scheduled like this unless in specific compounds maybe. These generally represent substances with lower abuse potential or those that are highly diluted.
Okay, so those are the substances and how they're grouped by perceived risk. Now let's tackle the actual offenses. We'll start with manufacture or delivery offenses, which fall under Health and Safety Code sections 481.112 through 481.112 plus 481.122 for delivery to a child. The core idea seems to be knowingly manufacturing, delivering, or possessing with intent to deliver, and crucially, that the aggregate weight, including all the cutting agents and fillers, is what determines the severity. How stark is the escalation of penalties based purely on quantity?
It's incredibly stark, and it happens fast. The penalties jump dramatically from state jail felonies, the lowest level felony in Texas, all the way up to first-degree felonies, which carry potential life sentences, and the accompanying fines skyrocket into the hundreds of thousands of dollars for large amounts. That aggregate weight, including any adulterants or dilutants, is absolutely the key determining factor.
Let's use penalty group 1 as a prime example. Walk us through that escalation.
Okay, for PG-1 substances, think cocaine, meth, heroin. For manufacture or delivery, possessing less than 1 gram with intent to deliver or manufacturing less than 1 gram is already a state jail felony, punishable by 180 days to 2 years in state jail and up to a $10,000 fine.
Already a felony for less than a gram.
Yes. Then it jumps quickly. 1 gram up to less than 4 grams is a second-degree felony. 2 to 20 years in prison, up to $10,000 fine. 4 grams up to less than 200 grams is a first-degree felony. 5 to 99 years or life, up to $10,000 fine.
Wow, 4 grams hits first degree.
It does. And then it gets even more serious for larger trafficking amounts. 200 grams up to less than 400 grams is still a first-degree felony, but the punishment range is enhanced. Minimum 10 years, maximum 99 years or life, and the fine jumps up to $100,000. And for 400 grams or more, it's another enhanced first-degree felony. Minimum 15 years, maximum 99 years or life, and the fine maxes out at $250,000.
So the prison time gets longer minimums and the fines get massive at the higher weights. This rapid escalation really underscores how seriously the law views manufacturing and trafficking these PG-1 substances.
Absolutely. It's designed to hit traffickers hard.
And for penalty group 1A, which is LSD,
Yeah.
you mentioned it's based on units, not weight, correct? How does that penalty ladder look?
Precisely. For PG-1A, manufacture or delivery penalties are based on dosage units. Fewer than 20 units is a state jail felony. 20 units up to fewer than 80 units is a second-degree felony. 80 units up to fewer than 4,000 units is a first-degree felony. And for 4,000 units or more, it becomes an enhanced first-degree felony with that same 15 years to life imprisonment range and a fine up to $250,000. So similar escalation, just measured differently.
Okay. What about penalty group 1B, the fentanyl group? Given that potential murder offense link we discussed, I imagine these penalties for manufacture or delivery are particularly severe, maybe even more so than PG-1.
They are indeed among the most stringent, reflecting the extreme danger. For manufacture or delivery of PG-1B substances, like fentanyl, less than 1 gram starts as a third-degree felony, 10 years, up to $10 fine, which is actually higher than PG-1 start.
Higher starting point. Interesting.
Yes. Then 1 gram up to less than 4 grams is a second-degree felony. 4 grams up to less than 200 grams is a first-degree felony, but with an enhanced potential fine up to $20,000. Then, 200 grams up to less than 400 grams is an enhanced first-degree felony, 1599 years life, fine up to $200,000. And 400 grams or more carries a minimum of 20 years up to 99 or life, and a potential fine up to a staggering $500,000.
$500,000 fine. Those escalating fines are clearly designed to cripple illicit operations financially alongside the long prison terms.
Without a doubt, it reflects the immense danger associated with illicit fentanyl.
And for penalty groups 2 and 2A, things like ecstasy, mushrooms, THC concentrates, and synthetics, how does manufacture or delivery stack up there?
For both PG2 and 2A, the penalty structure for manufacture or delivery largely mirrors that of PG1 in its weight-based escalation. It starts with state jail felonies for less than 1 gram, jumps to a second-degree felony for 1 gram to less than 4 grams, becomes a first-degree felony for 4 grams up to less than 400 grams, and for 400 grams or more, it's an enhanced first-degree felony carrying 10 to 99 years or life, and a fine up to $100,000.
So still very serious first-degree felonies for relatively small amounts, reflecting that the law considers trafficking these substances a major issue.
Definitely.
And finally, penalty groups 3 and 4 for manufacture or delivery. These are generally less potent substances, right?
Generally, yes, but the penalties for trafficking large quantities are still extremely severe. For PG 3 and 4, manufacture or delivery of less than 28 grams, which is almost an ounce, is a state jail felony. Then 28 grams up to less than 200 grams is a second-degree felony. 200 grams up to less than 400 grams is a first-degree felony. And for 400 grams or more, it's an enhanced first-degree felony with 10 to 99 years or life and a fine up to $100,000.
So even for things like Xanax or codeine syrup, if you're caught manufacturing or delivering large amounts over 400 grams, you're facing the same potential prison time as someone dealing large amounts of meth or cocaine.
That's correct. The quantity really drives the penalty level across the board for manufacture and delivery. It's clear the focus is on stopping distribution, regardless of the specific substance, once you hit those higher weights.
It's clear that the quantities dictate a dramatic shift in felony degrees across all groups. Now, are there any specific enhancements if someone is manufacturing drugs with a child present? That seems particularly awful.
Yes, the law specifically addresses that egregious situation with significant enhancements designed to deter endangering children in these incredibly hazardous environments, like meth labs. If a child younger than 18 years of age was present on the premises during a penalty group 1 manufacture offense.
PG1 specifically.
Okay. Yes, for PG1 manufacture, the punishments are increased by 1 degree. So, for example, what would typically be a state jail felony becomes a third-degree felony. What would be a second-degree felony becomes a first-degree felony. And for the higher quantity offenses that are already first-degree, the minimum terms of imprisonment are increased significantly. In example, the 10-year minimum might become 15, 15 might become 20, and the maximum potential fines are also raised. It reflects the heightened societal condemnation when children are involved or exposed to such danger.
Good. Okay, there's also a separate specific offense mentioned for delivery of controlled substance or marijuana to a child. This sounds like it directly targets individuals who would prey on younger people.
It is a distinct and extremely serious offense under HSC 481.122. A person commits this offense if they knowingly deliver a controlled substance from penalty groups 1, 1A, 1B, 2, or 3.
So most of the groups, but not 4.
Correct, not PG4. Or if they knowingly deliver marijuana to a person who is defined as a child, meaning under 18 years of age, or to someone the actor knows is enrolled in a public or private primary or secondary school. It also applies if the actor knows or believes the recipient intends to then deliver it to such a person.
So using a kid as a middleman is covered too.
Yes. This offense is automatically classified as a second-degree felony, regardless of the amount delivered.
A second-degree felony just for the act of delivering to a minor. That sends a strong message.
It absolutely does. It underscores the legal system's severe stance on protecting children from exposure to illicit substances and exploitation by dealers.
Are there any specific defenses listed for this particular charge? It seems like maybe there could be edge cases, like minors sharing among themselves.
Yes, the statute provides 2 specific affirmative defenses. An affirmative defense means the defendant has the burden to prove it applies. First, it's a defense if the actor themselves was also a child under 18 at the time the offense was committed. So, a minor delivering to another minor might have a defense here under specific conditions.
Okay, minor to minor is different. What's the second defense?
Second, it's a defense if the actor was younger than 21 years of age at the time, delivered only 1/4 ounce or less of marijuana, specifically, and crucially, received no remuneration, no payment for the delivery.
Okay, so someone under 21 sharing a small amount of weed for free with someone under 18 might have a defense.
Potentially, yes. These specific conditions seem designed to differentiate between predatory adults targeting minors for profit or exploitation, and perhaps situations involving young people sharing small amounts socially without a commercial aspect, particularly for marijuana.
Okay, that clarifies the delivery to a child offense. Now let's shift from manufacture and delivery, which often implies dealing, to simple possession offenses. These are covered in HSE 481.1154 through 481.111. The core idea here is knowingly or intentionally possessing a controlled substance unless you got it legally, through a valid prescription or practitioner's order. And again, I assume aggregate weight is paramount.
That's the key, exactly. Unless you have that legal justification, knowingly or intentionally possessing these substances is an offense. And just like with manufacturer delivery, the penalties scale dramatically based on the aggregate weight, including all those adulterants or dilutants.
Let's run through the possession penalties for the different groups. How does penalty group 1 and 1B possession look? Remember, PG1B is the fentanyl group.
Right. For both PG1 and the highly dangerous PG1B substances, possession follows a very steep penalty curve. Possessing less than 1 gram is already a state jail felony.
Still a felony for just personal use amount, potentially.
Potentially, yes. The law doesn't distinguish motive at this stage, just quantity. Then, 1 gram up to less than 4 grams jumps to a third-degree felony. 4 grams up to less than 200 grams is a second-degree felony. 200 grams up to less than 400 grams is a first-degree felony. And possessing 400 grams or more is an enhanced first-degree felony carrying 10 to 99 years or life imprisonment and fines up to $100,000.
So the possession ladder climbs almost as steeply as the delivery ladder for these serious drugs. It clearly shows the law's intent to heavily penalize even possession of larger quantities, likely assuming it implies proximity to distribution.
That's a fair interpretation of the structure, yes.
And for penalty group 1A, LSD possession, which is unit-based again, how does that escalate?
For PG1A possession, it's unit-based, following a similar, very severe escalation path. Possessing fewer than 20 units is a state jail felony. 20 units up to fewer than 80 units is a third-degree felony. 80 units up to fewer than 4,000 units is a second-degree felony. 4,000 units up to fewer than 8,000 units is a first-degree felony. And possessing 8,000 or more units triggers an enhanced first-degree felony with 15 to 99 years or life imprisonment and fines up to $250,000.
8,000 hits of LSD is obviously a massive amount, definitely trafficking level. The jumps between the felony degrees seem particularly steep there, Pia.
They are, likely reflecting the high concentration of psychoactive potential per unit for LSD compared to, say, a gram of powder.
Okay, moving to penalty group 2 possession. Ecstasy, mushrooms, THC concentrates, etc. How does that scale?
For PG2 possession, less than 1 gram is a state jail felony, just like PG1. Then 1 gram up to less than 4 grams is a third-degree felony. 4 grams up to less than 400 grams is a second-degree felony. And possessing 400 grams or more is a first-degree felony, carrying 5 to 99 years or life imprisonment, and a fine up to $50,000. Still very serious consequences, starting at the felony level, even for small amounts.
Right. Now, what about penalty group 2A, those synthetic cannabinoids like K2SPICE? How do the possession penalties compare for those? Are they treated the same as PG2?
Actually, no. This is one of the notable differences in the penalty structure. For PG2A, possession penalties actually start at the misdemeanor level for smaller quantities.
Oh, interesting. Why the difference?
It's hard to say definitively, perhaps reflecting their newer emergence, the initial classification challenges, or maybe a legislative decision that small amounts of these, while dangerous, shouldn't immediately trigger a felony. So for PG2A possession, 2 ounces or less is a Class B misdemeanor. 4 ounces down to more than 2 ounces is a Class A misdemeanor.
Okay, misdemeanors for smaller amounts, but it escalates.
Oh yes, it escalates significantly. Possessing 5 pounds down to more than 4 ounces jumps straight to a state jail felony. Then it follows a more familiar felony progression based on weight. 50 pounds down to more than 5 pounds is a third-degree felony. 2,000 pounds down to more than 50 pounds is a second-degree felony. And possessing more than 2,000 pounds is a first-degree felony, carrying 5 to 99 years or life imprisonment and a fine up to $50,000.
2,000 pounds. That's literally a ton. But, okay, the key difference is that PG2A starts with misdemeanors for possession of smaller amounts, unlike PG1 or PG2.
Correct. That's a unique aspect of the PG2A structure.
And finally, how about possession penalties for penalty group 3 and 4? Prescription meds, steroids, weaker codeine mixes.
For PG3 and 4 possession, the penalties are less severe at the lowest quantities, also starting at the misdemeanor level, but they still escalate significantly. For less than 28 grams, again, almost an ounce. Possession of a PG3 substance is a Class A misdemeanor, while possession of a PG4 substance is like Class B misdemeanor.
So slightly different misdemeanor levels for PG3 versus PG4 at the bottom.
Yes. But once you cross that 28-gram threshold, it jumps straight to felony territory for both. 28 grams up to less than 200 grams is a third-degree felony. 200 grams up to less than 400 grams is a second-degree felony. And possessing 400 grams or more is a first-degree felony, carrying 5 to 99 years or life imprisonment and a fine up to $50K.
So even for possessing substances perceived as less dangerous, like Valium or cough syrup, if you have a large quantity, over 400 grams, you could still face potential life in prison. The quantity really is king here.
It absolutely drives the severity across all penalty groups for possession, just as it does for manufacture and delivery.
Now, it's important to note the specific way marijuana offenses are treated, isn't it? Our source makes a point of saying there's no intent to deliver charge for marijuana, only possession or actual delivery. This sounds like a crucial simplification compared to how other controlled substances are handled.
That's a critical distinction, yes, and unique to marijuana offenses under Texas law, as described here. Unlike other drugs where you can be charged with possession with intent to deliver based on quantity, packaging, scales, etc. for marijuana, the law prosecutes only the actual physical delivery or simple possession. The element of intent to deliver isn't a separate charge for marijuana itself.
So the penalties are just based on quantity for either possessing it or actually handing it over.
Exactly. The penalties are strictly quantity-based for both acts. Let's break them down. For delivery of marijuana, delivering a very small amount, 1/4 ounce or less, without receiving any payment, no remuneration, is a Class B misdemeanor.
Okay, lowest level for sharing a tiny bit.
Right. But if you deliver that same 1/4 ounce or less and do receive remuneration, you sell it, it jumps to a Class A misdemeanor.
Randy changes hands, penalty goes up.
Makes sense. Then it escalates to felonies based on weight. Delivering 5 pounds down to more than 1/4 ounce is a state jail felony. Delivering 50 pounds down to more than 5 pounds is a second-degree felony. Delivering 2,000 pounds, a ton, down to more than 50 pounds is a first-degree felony. And delivering more than 2,000 pounds is an enhanced first-degree felony carrying 10 to 99 years or life, and a fine up to $100,000.
So delivering large amounts of marijuana still carries massive penalties, potential life sentences?
Absolutely. The state still treats large-scale marijuana trafficking very seriously.
And how about possession of marijuana? How does that scale?
Possession of marijuana also begins at the misdemeanor level for smaller personal use amounts. 2 ounces or less is a Class B misdemeanor. 4 ounces down to more than 2 ounces is a Class A misdemeanor.
Okay, up to 4 ounces is still a misdemeanor.
Correct. But similar to delivery, it escalates quickly after that. Possessing 5 pounds down to more than 4 ounces jumps to a state jail felony. Possessing 50 pounds down to more than 5 pounds is a third-degree felony. Possessing 2,000 pounds down to more than 50 pounds is a second-degree felony. And possessing more than 2,000 pounds is a first-degree felony, carrying 5 to 99 years or life imprisonment and a fine up to $50,000.
So the felony thresholds for possession are slightly higher weights than for delivery, but possessing large amounts still leads to very serious felony charges.
That's right. The penalty structure clearly distinguishes between personal use amounts and quantities that suggest trafficking, even for simple possession.
Okay, moving beyond possession and delivery of the final product, there are also specific offenses related to the chemicals used to make controlled substances. Let's discuss possession or transport of certain chemicals with intent to manufacture controlled substance, HSD 481.124. This seems aimed squarely at cutting off the supply chain at the source, hitting the illegal labs.
Precisely. This offense targets the possession or transportation of the precursor chemicals and essential reagents needed for illicit drug manufacturing. A person commits this offense if they possess or transport specific listed chemicals like anhydrous ammonia, often used in meth production, an immediate precursor we defined earlier, or certain other chemical precursors listed in the Health and Safety Code with the clear intent to unlawfully manufacture a controlled substance.
So intent is key here again. You have to prove they plan to make drugs with these chemicals.
Intent is crucial. However, the law makes proving that intent easier in some cases, particularly for methamphetamine.
Ah, right. The source mentions a legal presumption of intent specifically for methamphetamine manufacture. How does that work?
Yes, this is a powerful tool for prosecutors. The source clearly states an intent to unlawfully manufacture methamphetamine is legally presumed if the actor possesses or transports certain combinations of items. For example, intent is presumed if someone has anhydrous ammonia transported in an improper container, or if they possess lithium metal removed from a battery and immersed in kerosene or another solvent, or if they possess phenylacetic acid with immediate precursors for meth.
Okay, specific dangerous combinations.
Or, another trigger for the presumption, if they possess more than 9 grams total, or 3 or more containers packaged for retail sale, or 300 or more tablets or capsules of any ephedrine or pseudoephedrine product.
Like Sudafed.
Exactly. And they also possess at the same time specific combinations of other listed chemicals like acetone, red phosphorus, certain acids or solvents, or specific laboratory equipment commonly used in meth manufacture like glassware, heating mantles, ventilation equipment.
So possessing a large amount of Sudafed plus other key ingredients or lab gear equals presumed intent to make meth.
That's the essence of the presumption. It connects the possession of these precursor chemicals and equipment directly to the illicit manufacturing goal, significantly easing the burden of proof for the prosecution in meth lab cases.
What are the penalties for this precursor chemical offense? Does it depend on what drug they intended to make?
Yes, the penalties vary based on the penalty group of the controlled substance the person intended to manufacture. Possessing precursors with intent to make a PG3 or 4 substance is a state jail felony. If the target was a PG2 or 2A substance, it's a third-degree felony. And if they intended to make a PG1, 1A, or 1B substance, like meth, heroin, fentanyl, it's a second-degree felony. If the target substance falls into one of the miscellaneous schedules, not in a penalty group, it's a Class A misdemeanor.
Okay. Now, we talked earlier about how incredibly broad the definition of drug paraphernalia is, potentially covering everyday items if the intent is there. So what are the actual offenses for possession or delivery of drug paraphernalia? HSC 481.125.
Right. Having established what paraphernalia is, the law then makes it an offense to knowingly or intentionally use or possess with intent to use drug paraphernalia for any of those listed drug-related activities: planting, manufacturing, testing, packaging, storing, injecting, inhaling, etc., a controlled substance in violation of the law. Again, the intended use of the item is crucial.
So possessing a pipe with intent to smoke crack is an offense. What about selling that pipe?
That falls under the delivery offenses. It's illegal to knowingly or intentionally deliver, possess with intent to deliver, or manufacture with intent to deliver drug paraphernalia if you know, or reasonably should know, that the person receiving it intends to use it for illicit drug purposes.
And there's a specific enhancement for delivering to minors here, too.
Yes, similar to the drug delivery offense, there's an enhanced offense if the person delivering the paraphernalia is 18 years of age or older and delivers it to someone younger than 18 who is also at least 3 years younger than the actor. Essentially, an adult furnishing paraphernalia to a significantly younger minor.
What are the penalties for these paraphernalia offenses? They seem less severe than drug possession itself.
They generally are. Simple possession of drug paraphernalia is only a Class C misdemeanor, which is punishable by a fine only, up to $500, no jail time. It's the lowest level of criminal offense in Texas.
Okay, a ticket, essentially. Yeah. But delivery is more serious.
Yes. Delivery of drug paraphernalia is a Class A misdemeanor, up to 1 year in county jail, fine up to $4,000. And the source notes it can be enhanced, potentially meaning a minimum jail term of 90 days up to a year if the person has a prior conviction for the same offense, delivery of paraphernalia. And that enhanced offense of delivering paraphernalia to a minor we just mentioned, that's a state jail felony.
So selling paraphernalia is taken more seriously than just possessing it, especially if selling to kids. Got it. What about trying to cheat drug tests? Is that illegal? The source mentions falsification of drug test results, HSC 481.133.
Yes, the law specifically addresses attempts to tamper with or cheat drug screening processes. It's a Class B misdemeanor to knowingly or intentionally use or possess with intent to use any substance or device designed to falsify the results of a drug test.
Like fake urine or additives.
Exactly. Things like synthetic urine kits, chemical adulterants you add to a sample, or even devices designed to deliver a clean sample.
Huh.
Just possessing or using those with intent to cheat is a Class B. Furthermore, it's a Class A misdemeanor to knowingly or intentionally deliver, possess with intent to deliver, or manufacture with intent to deliver such a substance or device.
So selling the cheating kits is a higher offense than just using one.
Correct. It highlights the legal system's aim to prevent the proliferation and sale of these tools designed specifically to undermine drug testing procedures, which are often used for employment, probation, or legal purposes.
Okay, now, here's an offense that really brings home the severe human cost of the drug trade. Manufacture or delivery of controlled substance causing death or serious bodily injury, HSC 481.141. This seems like a major escalation beyond the typical drug charge penalties we've discussed.
It absolutely is a significant enhancement, and one that has become increasingly relevant and utilized, unfortunately, especially in the face of the fentanyl and opioid crisis causing so many overdose deaths.
How does it work?
The law states that if it's shown beyond a reasonable doubt during the guilt or innocence phase of a trial that a person died or suffered serious bodily injury as a direct result of injecting, ingesting, inhaling, or introducing into their body any controlled substance that was manufactured or delivered by the defendant.
So a direct causal link between the defendant's drug and the victim's death or injury.
Yes. If that link is proven, the punishment for the underlying drug manufacture or delivery offense is increased by 1 degree.
Increased by 1 degree. What does that mean practically?
It means the penalty range bumps up significantly. If the underlying offense was punishable as a state jail felony, it becomes a third-degree felony. If it was a third-degree felony, it becomes a second-degree felony. If it was a second-degree felony, it becomes a first-degree felony. This enhancement applies to manufacture delivery offenses across penalty groups 1 through 4, and also to the offense of delivery of a controlled substance to a child.
So, selling drugs that kill someone automatically makes the charge much more serious, potentially adding decades to the sentence.
Precisely. And what's also critical, as noted in the source, is that if the punishment is increased under this section, the court often cannot order the resulting sentence to run concurrently at the same time with any other sentence the defendant might receive. The time usually has to be served consecutively or stacked.
So the sentence for causing the death gets added on top.
Yeah.
This enhancement essentially holds dealers much more directly accountable for the lethal consequences of their actions, almost treating it like a form of homicide or manslaughter, tied directly to the drug dealing itself.
That's a very accurate way to describe its impact and likely intent, especially in the context of fentanyl overdoses where tiny amounts can be fatal. It provides a specific legal mechanism to address those deaths directly within the drug statutes.
Okay, we've covered a vast amount of ground on what's illegal and the often incredibly severe penalties. But it's really important to recognize, as our source does, that not all activity involving substances that fall under these laws is illicit. There are crucial exemptions and authorized use cases, which really shed light on the complexity and sometimes the necessary accommodations within drug law.
That's a vital point, yeah. It illustrates the nuanced application of these laws. They aren't always just a blanket prohibition. The law carves out specific scenarios where actions involving controlled substances, which would otherwise be illegal, are actually permitted.
Like what? The source mentions peyote.
Right. There's a specific exemption for peyote. The provisions relating to its possession and distribution do not apply when it's used by a bona fide member of the Native American Church in connection with established religious ceremonies of that church. It also exempts a person who might supply peyote to the church for these ceremonies.
Religious exemption.
Exactly. Though the source includes a specific note mentioning that the exemption might not apply to a member with less than 25% Indian blood, which reflects historical legal complexities around tribal membership and religious rights. But the core is a cultural and religious accommodation within the law, recognizing deeply held spiritual practices involving peyote.
That's quite specific.
Yeah.
What other exemptions are listed, perhaps for more medical or scientific purposes?
Yes, several others. Another exemption applies to the possession and distribution of denatured sodium pentobarbital. This exemption applies specifically to DEA-registered humane societies or animal control agencies when the substance is used strictly for the purpose of euthanizing injured, sick, homeless, or unwanted animals.
Okay, for humane animal euthanasia. Makes sense.
Then there's an exemption for tetrahydrocannabinols, THC, or their derivatives, or drug paraphernalia, but only when they are used in connection with federally approved therapeutic research programs.
So allowing scientific research into cannabis or THC without breaking the law.
Precisely. This allows for scientific and medical advancement and the exploration of potential medical uses for these substances without legal impediment under very controlled conditions. And finally, the provisions relating to anabolic steroids do not apply when they are being administered to livestock or poultry.
For agricultural use, like bulking up cattle.
Essentially, yes. This highlights the legitimate agricultural and veterinary uses of some regulated substances, acknowledging their applications outside of human recreational use or performance enhancement.
Okay. Now, one of the most significant recent developments in this area, something our source details, is around low THC cannabis for specific medical uses in Texas. This seems distinct from the general hemp definition we discussed earlier, right? It has a slightly higher THC threshold and very specific medical applications allowed.
Yes, absolutely distinct and important to understand. Low THC cannabis under the Texas Compassionate Use Program, TCUP, is defined differently than hemp. It's defined as cannabis sativa L, and any part of that plant or any compound, manufacture, salt derivative, mixture, preparation, resin, or oil derived from it that contains not more than 1%, 1.0% by weight of tetrahydrocannabinol.
1% THC, that's higher than the 0.3% for hemp.
Correct. It allows for products with a bit more THC, potentially offering different therapeutic effects than very low THC hemp products like CBD oil. And crucially, its medical use under the program is specifically defined as ingestion by means other than smoking and only in a prescribed amount.
Ingestion, not smoking. Okay, and who's actually qualified to prescribe this low-THC cannabis?
Yeah.
It's clearly not just any doctor writing a script, is it?
No, it's very tightly controlled. Only a physician specifically qualified with respect to the patient's particular diagnosed medical condition may prescribe it. And being qualified has strict requirements. The physician must be licensed to practice medicine in Texas. They must be board certified in a medical specialty relevant to the treatment of the patient's specific debilitating medical condition by a board approved by the American Board of Medical Specialties or the Bureau of Osteopathic Specialists.
So a specialist in the relevant field.
Yes, and they must also dedicate a significant portion of their clinical practice to the evaluation and treatment of that specific medical condition for which the patient is seeking low-THC cannabis. Additionally, physicians participating in specific approved research programs related to compassionate use are also considered qualified if certified by the program's Institutional Review Board.
Wow, that's a high bar. It really ensures expertise and focuses it on specialists managing these specific conditions.
Absolutely. It's designed to ensure significant oversight and relevant medical expertise guides any prescription within the TCUP program.
And what about the patients? Who is eligible to receive a prescription for low-THC cannabis? It sounds like a very narrow set of qualifying conditions.
It is a very specific list. First, the patient must be a permanent resident of Texas. The prescribing physician must comply with all the registration requirements in the state's Compassionate Use Registry, which we'll get to. Most importantly, the physician must certify that the patient is diagnosed with one of a limited list of specific medical conditions.
What conditions are on that list?
As per the source, and this list can evolve legislatively, the qualifying conditions include epilepsy, a seizure disorder, multiple sclerosis, spasticity, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, terminal cancer, autism, and incurable neurodegenerative disease, and as of more recent updates, not explicitly in this older source, but relevant now, conditions like PTSD. The source also mentions any medical condition approved for a research program under the Health and Safety Code, provided the patient is receiving treatment under that program.
So primarily severe neurological conditions, cancer, autism.
Generally, yes. And the physician must also determine, based on their medical judgment, that the risk associated with the medical use of low-THC cannabis by that specific patient is reasonable in light of the potential therapeutic benefit for them. It's a very targeted, condition-specific program, not a broad medical marijuana system like in some other states.
Extremely targeted and regulated. What are the physician's responsibilities regarding that compassionate use registry you mentioned and managing the patient's treatment?
The physician has significant responsibilities here. Before writing or renewing a prescription, the qualified physician must register themselves as the prescriber for that specific patient in the state's online compassionate use registry, CURT. This registration isn't just names, it has to include detailed information. The physician's identifying info, the patient's name and date of birth, the exact dosage of low-THC cannabis prescribed, the means of administration ordered, for example, oil, tincture, and the total amount of low-THC cannabis required to fill the prescription.
So very detailed tracking.
Very. Furthermore, the physician is required to maintain a comprehensive patient treatment plan. This plan must detail the dosage, the means of administration, and the planned duration of the treatment with low-THC cannabis. Crucially, this plan must also include a strategy for monitoring the patient's symptoms and actively monitoring for indicators of tolerance or any adverse reaction to the low-THC cannabis.
So ongoing monitoring is built into the plan.
Absolutely. These detailed requirements ensure careful oversight, accountability, and data collection for medical use within the program. And importantly, possessing, producing, or cultivating low-THC cannabis is exempt from criminal penalties only for qualified patients or their legal guardians who hold a valid prescription entered into the registry, or for personnel of licensed dispensing organizations acting strictly within their duties.
Okay, that covers the tightly controlled medical cannabis program. Now, shifting gears slightly, our source also discusses dangerous drugs covered in Chapter 483 of the Health and Safety Code. This is explicitly a separate legal category from controlled substances. How do they differ, and why are they treated distinctly?
Right. It's crucial to understand that dangerous drugs are legally distinct from controlled substances, those in penalty groups 1 to 4 or federal schedules YB. The defining characteristic of a dangerous drug is that it's a device or, more commonly, a drug deemed unsafe for self-medication by the FDA, and it is not classified as a controlled substance.
So they need oversight, but aren't necessarily high abuse potential drugs.
Exactly. They are typically prescription drugs that are required by federal law to bear legends like caution. Federal law prohibits dispensing without prescription, or, more commonly now, simply RX only. This means they are regulated primarily because they require a professional's oversight, a doctor's prescription, and often a pharmacist's guidance for safe and effective use, perhaps due to potential side effects, interactions, or the need for a proper diagnosis and dosage. It's not necessarily because they have the high abuse potential that places drugs into the controlled substance schedules. Think of things like antibiotics, blood pressure medications, certain antidepressants, cholesterol drugs medically necessary but requiring a prescription for safety.
Okay, so it's about safety through professional oversight rather than primarily abuse potential. What are some of the common offenses related to these dangerous drugs, given they're not in the same controlled substance penalty tiers?
Several offenses are outlined in Chapter 483. Possession of a dangerous drug, HSC 483.041, without a valid prescription or order from a practitioner is generally a Class A misdemeanor. There's a long list of exemptions for professionals who legitimately handle these drugs as part of their job: pharmacists, hospitals, licensed practitioners, researchers, government officials, manufacturers, wholesalers, etc.
So simple possession without a script is a misdemeanor. What about selling them?
Delivery or offer of delivery of a dangerous drug, HSC 483.042, without authorization is more serious. It's a state jail felony. This applies unless the delivery is made by a licensed pharmacist or practitioner, according to legal prescription, with proper labeling containing specific required information: pharmacy name, address, date, prescription number, patient name, prescribing doctor, directions, drug name. There are exceptions for labeling requirements for institutionalized patients or certain animals raised for food production.
And there's a note about offers to sell.
Yes, interestingly, for this specific offense, delivery offer of a dangerous drug, the law requires that proof of an offer to sell must be corroborated by someone other than the person who received the offer or by other independent evidence. This is a higher burden of proof for proving just an offer compared to controlled substances, an important safeguard.
Interesting difference. What about making them?
Unauthorized manufacture of a dangerous drug, HSC 483.043, is also a state jail felony.
Okay. And what about messing with prescriptions themselves, like forging them? That seems like a common way people might try to illegally obtain these prescription-only drugs.
You're absolutely right, and the law addresses that directly. Forging or altering a prescription, HSC 483.045, is a Class B misdemeanor, but it gets enhanced to a Class A misdemeanor if the person has a prior conviction for the same offense. This offense is broad. It covers actually forging a prescription form, issuing one with a forged signature, or obtaining or attempting to obtain a dangerous drug using a forged, fictitious, or altered prescription. It also covers using a fake phone call to a pharmacy to get a prescription, or even possessing dangerous drugs that were obtained through such fraudulent means.
So trying to trick the pharmacy is specifically illegal. Are there offenses aimed at pharmacists themselves?
Yes, there are specific offenses targeting pharmacist compliance. For example, failing to retain prescription records as required by law, HSC 483.046, is a Class B misdemeanor, enhanced to Class A with prior. Similarly, refilling a prescription without authorization from the prescriber, HSC 483.047, is also a Class BA misdemeanor, although the source notes there are specific exceptions allowing emergency refills under certain conditions to ensure continuity of care.
And refusing inspection.
Right. Refusal to permit inspection, HSC 483.050, of required records or inventory by an authorized agent from a regulatory body like the Pharmacy Board or Health Department, is also a Class B misdemeanor, enhanced to Class A with a prior conviction. This ensures regulatory oversight.
Okay. Now, our source highlights another specific offense that seems really important: drug diversion by professionals, HSC 481.1285. This sounds like it specifically targets doctors, nurses, pharmacists, or others in the medical field who might misuse their privileged access to controlled substances.
It does, precisely. And it's treated very seriously because it represents a significant betrayal of professional trust and responsibility. This offense applies to registrants, those licensed by the DEA to handle controlled substances, dispensers, or anyone else who has access to controlled substances because of their profession or employment.
And there are two types of diversion described.
Yes. A person commits an offense if they knowingly convert a controlled substance to their own personal use or benefit because of their access through their profession or employment. That's a state jail felony. Or, perhaps more seriously in terms of public harm, if they knowingly divert a controlled substance for the unlawful use or benefit of another person, that's a third-degree felony.
So stealing drugs for yourself is a state jail felony, but selling or giving them away illegally to others is a higher third-degree felony.
Correct. This offense is very specifically targeted to prevent insider abuse and illicit trafficking of controlled substances by those healthcare professionals and others who are entrusted with handling them safely and legally.
Okay. Beyond the base penalties for all these offenses, are there other general enhancements that can stack onto these charges, making them even more severe? The source mentions a few.
Absolutely. Several factors unrelated to the drug itself can significantly escalate penalties, sometimes transforming a lower-level felony into a much more serious one with longer mandatory prison time. Deadly weapon enhancements are a major one.
Deadly weapon, like using a gun during a drug deal.
It includes firearms, yes, but the legal definition of a deadly weapon in Texas is broader. It includes firearms or anything manifestly designed, made, or adapted for the purpose of inflicting death or serious bodily injury, or anything that, in the manner of its use or intended use, is capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. So, a knife, a club, even potentially a vehicle could qualify depending on how it's used.
Okay. And how does it enhance the penalty?
If a deadly weapon finding is made in connection with a felony drug offense, meaning the weapon was used or exhibited during the crime, it can increase the punishment level. For instance, a state jail felony can be punished as a third-degree felony if a deadly weapon was involved. Critically, a deadly weapon finding often carries mandatory prison time requirements and severely limits parole eligibility. The source notes it mandates serving at least half the sentence imposed, or 30 calendar years, whichever is less, but no less than 2 years, before becoming eligible for parole in many cases involving a deadly weapon finding.
Wow. So having a weapon drastically changes the real time served. What else might escalate a charge?
Endangering a child under Penal Code 22.041 is another significant one that can be added on top of drug charges. This can apply if, for example, methamphetamine manufacturing occurs in the presence of a child, or if meth residue is detected in a child's body, or if someone responsible for a child's care illegally uses penalty group 1 or 1B substances in a way that endangers the child. This creates a separate serious felony charge focused on the harm or risk to the child.
Makes sense. What about gang activity?
Yes, enhancements for criminal street gang activities under Penal Code 71.023 can apply. The source specifically notes an enhanced penalty for penalty group 1B offenses, fentanyl, involving over 4 grams if the offense was committed as part of the activities of a documented criminal street gang. This increases the minimum prison sentence, reflecting the organized nature and increased societal harm of gang-related drug trafficking.
And one more specific substance mentioned, kratom.
Right. While kratom itself isn't generally listed in these penalty groups in the same way, the source notes a specific offense under the Health and Safety Code 444.004 for the distribution sale of kratom product to a minor. Selling kratom to someone under 18 is a Class C misdemeanor. This shows how specific substances, even if not fully scheduled like controlled substances, can still have regulations attached, particularly concerning sales to youth.
Okay, finally, let's look at some legal nuances around how evidence is handled and how seized property is disposed of. The source points out different rules for corroboration of testimony depending on whether it's a dangerous drug case or a controlled substance case. This sounds like a deep legal distinction.
Yes, this is a subtle but really important legal difference, particularly for prosecutors, defense attorneys, and law enforcement relying on testimony from informants or accomplices. For dangerous drug offenses, under HSC 483.072, the law states that a conviction can be obtained based solely on the uncorroborated testimony of a party to the offense, like an accomplice. There's no requirement for independent evidence to back up their testimony.
Okay, testimony alone can be enough for dangerous drugs. How is it different for controlled substances?
It's significantly different, providing more protection for the defendant. For controlled substance offenses, under Code of Criminal Procedure Art 38.141, a conviction cannot be obtained based solely on the testimony of an accomplice or a non-licensed undercover agent unless that testimony is corroborated by other evidence tending to connect the defendant with the offense committed.
Tending to connect the defendant, so just confirming the crime happened isn't enough.
Exactly. The corroborating evidence isn't sufficient if it merely shows that an offense was committed. It must specifically point towards the defendant being involved in that offense. This means more independent evidence is needed to secure a conviction for controlled substance offenses when the state's case relies heavily on the testimony of someone involved in the crime or a non-police informant. It's a higher standard of proof required for corroboration.
That's a really interesting difference in evidence standards. Okay, and what happens to the actual drugs, precursors, paraphernalia, or plants once they're seized by law enforcement? They can't just keep it all indefinitely, right? And it's not just tossed in the tracks, obviously.
Absolutely not. There are very specific legal procedures for handling seized controlled substance property. This includes the substances themselves, any analogs, paraphernalia, precursors, lab apparatus, raw materials used to make drugs, and controlled substance plants, like marijuana or opium poppies. These items are subject to seizure by law enforcement and then summary forfeiture by the state if they are possessed, manufactured, or transported illegally, or if the plants are found growing wild or the owner is unknown.
Summary forfeiture, meaning it just automatically belongs to the state.
Essentially, yes, without a lengthy court process needed just to forfeit the illegal items themselves, though related assets like cars or cash might require a separate civil forfeiture case. There's an interesting exception noted for unharvested peyote found in its natural state, again, likely reflecting those cultural religious considerations.
And destruction. How is that handled accountably?
The law sets very strict rules for the destruction of seized controlled substances to ensure integrity and prevent diversion. The destruction must be witnessed by more than one person. A detailed inventory of what's being destroyed must be prepared before destruction. And afterwards, a formal statement must be made detailing the time, place, and manner of destruction, including the names and positions of all witnesses present. This creates a clear paper trail for accountability.
A formal process. What are the options for what happens to the seized items before destruction? Can they be used?
Yes, there are several disposition options. Law enforcement agencies can retain controlled substances or precursors for legitimate law enforcement purposes, such as for training canine units or for use in undercover operations, though that's highly regulated. They can also deliver seized substances to another government agency or an authorized person for scientific analysis, research, or training. Or, most commonly, especially for bulk amounts, the final disposition is destruction.
What if they need to use some seized drugs in an ongoing investigation, like for an undercover buy?
There are strict requirements for that, too. If substances are kept for investigative use, there must be a qualified laboratory analysis conducted both before the substance is used in the investigation and after it's recovered. The substance must be stored securely, accessible only to the head of the agency or a specifically designated responsible individual. And a detailed log must be maintained documenting every time the substance is accessed, who accessed it, the quantity used, and the purpose. Chain of custody is paramount.
Okay. And what about disposing of huge quantities? Like if they seize hundreds or thousands of pounds, you can't keep all that in an evidence locker forever.
Right. The law provides a specific process for disposing of excess quantities of seized drugs before the related court case is fully resolved. This is crucial for managing large seizures safely and efficiently. The procedure requires law enforcement to take at least 5 random samples from the bulk seizure. They must take clear photographs that accurately depict the total amount seized. They need to determine the gross weight or liquid measure of the entire seizure.
And those samples and photos can be used in court.
Yes. These representative samples, the photographs, and the records of the weight measure are admissible as evidence in court to represent the total quantity seized, allowing the agency to then safely destroy the bulk of the hazardous material. The law also specifically addresses hazardous waste or byproducts discovered at illicit labs. These can be destroyed following applicable environmental standards, again with photographs taken beforehand for documentation. This entire system is designed to ensure evidence integrity, maintain a clear chain of custody, allow for safe handling and disposal of dangerous materials, and protect public safety and the environment.
All right, as we begin to wrap up this really intensive deep dive into the Health and Safety Code concerning controlled substances and dangerous drugs, it's important to connect all this legal framework back to the real world specifically, how these substances impact individuals, families, and communities every day. Our source material even highlights what it considers the 3 most commonly abused drug categories.
Yes, based on the information provided in that handout, the 3 most commonly abused drug categories listed are narcotic opioid, stimulants cocaine, and depressants. These broad categories certainly represent a huge portion of the substance abuse issues faced by society, driving addiction, related crime, and significant public health challenges.
And for people out there, parents, friends, employers who might be concerned about someone, What are some common signs or types of paraphernalia they might look for? The source breaks it down a bit by how the drug might be taken.
Right. Recognizing potential paraphernalia can be an indicator, though context is always key. The source lists some examples based on administration method. For injection use, look for items like needles, syringes, maybe small cotton balls, spoons with burn marks underneath, belts or rubber tubing used as tourniquets. For inhalation, snorting or smoking, you might find rolled up paper or bills, small straws, pipes, glass, metal, or homemade, bongs, bags, or balloons used to inhale fumes, or modified containers. For ingestion, maybe finding loose pills or capsules outside of prescription bottles, or gelatin capsules that could be used to swallow powders. And for topical applications, perhaps unusual numbers of patches, eye drop containers, or phone gel containers being used inappropriately. Recognizing these items could be crucial indicators alongside behavioral signs.
This issue also deeply and tragically impacts young people. Our source provides some really alarming statistics about kids and drug use, shedding light on just how early substance abuse can begin.
These statistics, while perhaps a bit dated from the source document's time, likely mid-90s based on one stat, are indeed unsettling and paint a concerning picture of youth substance use initiation. Some figures provided were 60% of kids who use marijuana before age 15 go on to use cocaine. Also, between 1992 and 1995, marijuana usage among 17-year-olds doubled. And a claim from Columbia University found that kids who smoke marijuana are 85 times more likely to use cocaine.
85 times. That sounds incredibly high, maybe reflecting specific study parameters, but the linkage is the point.
Right, and perhaps even more relatable today is the finding that the average age for kids to begin experimenting with illegal substances is 13 years old. And maybe the most unsettling fact presented for parents is that on average, kids found by their parents to be using drugs have been using for 2 years prior to discovery.
2 years. That delayed discovery period is a huge challenge for parents and families trying to intervene early. It underscores how adept young people can be at concealing substance use and how long it can go undetected before causing more serious problems.
Exactly, which makes recognizing the more general signs so important.
So for parents, family members, teachers, or anyone concerned about someone, what are some of those general signs of drug use they can look for? These aren't just physical evidence, but often behavioral changes too.
The source offers a really useful list of general behavioral and appearance signs that could warrant attention. These include things like an abrupt change in the individual's work or school attendance, or a noticeable decline in the quality of their work or their academic performance compared to their past efforts. Look for unusual outbreaks of temper or sudden and drastic changes in their overall mood, maybe becoming unusually irritable, verbally or physically abusive.
Mood swings, declining performance, what else?
They might start acting paranoid or confused, maybe having trouble following conversations or remembering things, consistently not taking responsibility for their actions, blaming others for problems, a general overall negative change in their attitude towards life, family, or responsibilities, withdrawing from family activities and longtime friends, maybe hanging out with a new, different crowd.
Changes in social circles and attitude.
Yes. Also, drastic changes in their physical appearance and grooming habits, maybe suddenly neglecting personal hygiene, looking unkempt, significant weight loss or gain. Associating with known drug users is often a red flag. Financial signs can be important too. Frequent or unusual borrowing of money, items going missing from the home, or, conversely, always seeming to have a lot of money without a clear, legitimate source like a job. And finally, acting overly secretive about their actions, possessions, phone calls, or where they're going. Being evasive or defensive when asked simple questions.
That's a comprehensive list. None of these alone is definitive proof, of course, but a pattern of these changes should definitely raise concern.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing a pattern of significant change from their previous baseline behavior.
All very important signs to be aware of. And finally, for anyone seeking more concrete information, perhaps needing to identify a pill they found, or wanting official analysis, or just looking for reliable resources online, our source lists several helpful places to turn.
Yes, for pill identification and general drug information, the source specifically points to drugs.com, which remains a very comprehensive and useful online resource for identifying pills by imprint, shape, and color, and getting information on medications. For official chemical analysis of suspected controlled substances, individuals or law enforcement agencies would need to turn to places like the Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS crime labs, other certified and accredited local agency labs, or federal agencies like the DEA lab. These are the authoritative bodies for definitive substance analysis.
And for broader information, education, or finding help with addiction.
The source lists several websites that were relevant at the time, and many still offer valuable information or links to resources. These include www.drugs.com, as mentioned, www.drug-rehabs.org, www.sixwise.com, www.addictionhelpline.com, www.purdupharma.com, manufacturer site used with context, the DEA's website at www.justice.govindex.htm, and www.drugfreeteenagers.com. While web addresses change, these suggest types of resources available online for information, prevention, and treatment referrals. Checking current government sites like samhsa.gov, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is always a good idea, too.
Excellent. Good resources to have. Hashtag tag outro. Wow. Okay. What a deep dive that was. We've covered so much ground today. To understanding that.
And touching on the specific exemptions, the dangerous drugs category, and the real-world impacts. It's a massive landscape.
It really is. We've truly unpacked a complex and absolutely critical area of the health and safety code.
Indeed. And I think what comes through is how incredibly precise these legal definitions have to be. They really are the foundation for everything that follows: how a substance gets classified, the cascading impact on potential penalties, even the strict procedures for how law enforcement has to handle evidence. Understanding this level of detail, even just grasping the basics we covered, is really fundamental to understanding the broader legal landscape around drugs and appreciating why these laws are structured the way they are. It directly affects public safety, the justice system, healthcare, everything.
Absolutely. So as we close out this deep dive, here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. Knowing the intricate details of how these substances are defined, classified, and regulated, what surprising connections do you now see between this complex legal framework and the everyday experiences of health, medicine, public safety, or even commerce in your own life or community?
That's a great question. For me, I think what truly stands out is how the law, despite seeming rigid with these definitions, is constantly trying to adapt, or maybe forced to adapt. We saw it with the controlled substance analog definition, created specifically to try and keep pace with chemists designing new illicit drugs.
Right, trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And we saw it with the very nuanced definitions distinguishing hemp from marijuana and the creation of the low THC cannabis program, reflecting evolving societal understanding, agricultural possibilities, and potential medical needs. The legal framework isn't entirely static. It's more like a living, breathing entity constantly responding, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, to the ever-changing landscape of substances, their use, and their perceived impact. It's this ongoing attempt to balance public safety, individual liberty, medical necessity, and scientific reality. It really reminds us that legality itself, especially in this area, is often a moving target, shaped by science, public health crises, policy debates, and shifting public perception.
A moving target shaped by so many forces. That's a powerful thought to leave us with. Thank you, as always, for guiding us through that complexity.
My pleasure. Always fascinating stuff, even if it's heavy.
And thank you, our listeners, for joining us on another deep dive. We hope you found this exploration informative. Until next time.